This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The Egyptian Armed Forces announces major progress in counter-terrorism campaign. First evacuation flight of Libyan African migrants settled in Rwanda. And how Sino-Africa ties are improving connections between China and the African continent. Hello everyone, welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Also coming up, audiences in Johannesburg revel in once-in-a-lifetime performances at Joy of Jazz Festival. Let's start in North Africa, where the Egyptian Armed Forces has announced major progress in its counter-terrorism campaign in the Sinai. For 6 years, Egypt has been fighting militant insurgency in North Sinai. In recent years, the army has scaled up its military operation. In a statement released this weekend, it confirmed the deaths of 118 extremists during its latest operations. More on Egypt's fight against terrorism with CGTN's Adem Mahroui.
152 vehicles confiscated, 273 improvised explosive devices located and destroyed, 118 extremists in 33 hideouts killed. These are some of the numbers the Egyptian army announced in one of its biggest blows to terrorist groups in North Sinai.
These terrorist groups used to have bigger presence, huge weapons supply. But with the continuous military efforts in the Sinai, it managed to engage in fights around their hideouts and kill many of them. They are now very little in number, and they have been chased away from cities. They now take shelter on the desert outskirts.
Egypt is slowly and gradually winning its fight on terrorism. This weekend's announcement also shows how restless these groups are. They have dug 11 underground tunnels to smuggle supplies through the Egyptian borders. All have been demolished in the latest military missions announced. With the arms and financial resources cut, these groups are left to suffocate.
The remnant militants are too weak now. They only lightly attack checkpoints with small number of security forces. They can't attack big military camps, and if they do, it's usually a suicide mission. This is paving the road for massive economic development in North Sinai, which will help to complete the defeat of terrorism.
The Armed Forces' comprehensive military battle against terrorism is in its second year, and it still continues. The comprehensive plan enters a new phase to focus on development. And the new achievements announced this weekend will encourage the state to speed up the economic plan it has for North Sinai. Adem Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
African migrants living near Mexico's southern border are demanding for better living conditions at their camps in the border city of Tapachula. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, visited Tapachula on Saturday to inaugurate a new United Nations center. The center's aim is to help register and look after migrants in Mexico's southern border area. Every year, thousands of people from El Salvador, Guatemala and Honduras head north in search of a better life. Over the years, an increasing number of Africans are joining them with the aim of reaching the United States. The Trump administration this week announced plans to allow only 18,000 refugees to resettle in the United States in the 2020 fiscal year, the lowest number in the history of the modern refugee program.
We don't want anything. We just want to continue along our path. We want to continue north. We don't need anything from Mexico. Nothing. We don't need anything. We want to continue on our journeys.
We have a situation that has seen the violation of human rights, of abuses, of violence, of discrimination. Every day we hear dramatic stories and the number of cases isn't going down. Mexico's role, as we say at the UNHCR, is to provide protection for people who have lost protection from their countries. That is fundamental. The process of applying for asylum is a little complex, but there are many measures to reduce the bureaucracy without impacting on the rights of those calling for asylum.
Meanwhile, African refugees and asylum seekers from Libyan detention centers have been settled into accommodation at transit centers. The group was in the first evacuation flights to Rwanda. The evacuations are part of an unusual new effort to divert and care for people who failed to reach Europe. The Central and East African nations' agreement to take in 500 people who have been trapped in Libya has raised questions and concerns. It is not clear how long they might be held in Rwanda and how free they are to leave. Authorities say the first group of 66 Africans, including women and children, was in a bad state of health, and media access to their arrival was restricted.
We don't have to have a lot to give. We can share the little resources we have with a big hurt.
I need for my child to get the necessary vaccinations and medical support. I want to offer her education, shelter, and other basic rights. I also never had a chance to go to school. I would like to have an education.
Health officials in the Democratic Republic of Congo and the World Health Organization are conducting a massive immunization campaign to stem a measles outbreak that has claimed more than 3,000 lives this year. The authorities are targeting 825,000 children in 6 provinces across the country. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
An emergency measles vaccination campaign gets underway in the DRC's southwestern town of Masi-Manimba. The WHO has called the measles epidemic in the DRC the world's largest and fastest moving outbreak. That's because close to 200,000 cases have been reported this year.
There are many reasons why parents don't get their children vaccinated. One of the reasons is that some parents stop taking their children for immunization after 6 months.
Officials say more than 3,600 people have died of measles across the DRC. Most of the deaths occurred among children.
The reason why we have a huge epidemic in DRC is because over the years, immunization coverage in routine is very low, around 30%. According to recent surveys.
International aid agencies have focused more attention in containing the Ebola outbreak in eastern DRC, but more people have died of measles over the past year.
It is true that more focus was really on Ebola, but WHO is advocating for all diseases, including measles, including Ebola. But it is true that even for Ebola, we don't have enough resources. That is one of the problems that we have faced. But also for measles, it is true that we don't have enough resources.
Measles is a highly infectious respiratory disease that causes a runny nose and skin rash. It occurs mostly among children, but adults who haven't been vaccinated can also get infected. Insufficient funding for immunization programs and a weak health system have contributed to the spread of the measles outbreak across the DRC, but the international community has committed to support the government to strengthen its healthcare system in order to prevent such deaths. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he will not resign, insisting that Brexit be done before next month's deadline with no more delay.
Under no circumstances will we allow the UK to be trapped in the existing proposal, the arrangements that make sure that we are retained in the European tariff structure, retained in the customs union, retained in the single market, with no say on those arrangements. We must get rid of the so-called backstop. That's what I've always said, and that is what we're going to do.
Johnson is trying to rally the Conservative Party with the same message of delivering Brexit by the end of October, with or without a deal. Parliament has passed a law to force the Prime Minister to request a delay if he has not secured a deal with Brussels by the European Union summit in mid-October. Johnson has called it the Surrender Act, but declines to explain how he will deliver on his Brexit promise. You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. How Sino-Africa ties are improving connections between China and the African continent. And audiences in Johannesburg revel in once-in-a-lifetime performances at Joy of Jazz Festival.
For a look at some economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
The newly upgraded CGTN website offers optimized coverage of China and international affairs, as well as distinct voices from around the globe. Be the first to know the biggest political news and discover the background to the major decisions. Decode China with a different perspective and get a better understanding of how China sees the world. Go beyond the news with sharp opinions on the events shaping today's world and reveal a China you have never seen before. Listen to entrepreneurs for in-depth analysis of the economy and touch the pulse of new technology via our hands-on videos. Travel back in time with CGTN to learn about China's past and immerse yourself in Chinese culture. To discover the stories behind Kung Fu. Get the latest news on Chinese lifestyle, including travel, sports, and nature. Regular productions including Ask China put high-ranking officials on the spot, while C-Lab presents new ways of storytelling via cutting-edge technologies, and Global Stringer delivers unique videos from China and beyond. Take a look at the world from a different angle. See the difference.
AfricaLive. Find your voice.
Zimbabwe is on course to significantly reduce and ultimately eliminate cervical cancer, the most prevalent form of gynecological disease amongst women, thanks to a partnership with China's Maternal and Child Healthcare Initiative, which has donated equipment and provided training for caregivers.
Prior to the donation of this equipment, Zimbabwe relied on old and intrusive methods to screen for cervical cancer, with sometimes inconclusive results. In 2016, the National Health Commission of China donated screening and treatment equipment. I visited the cervical cancer unit and heard that it has improved screening accuracy and lightened the load on a country that carries a high disease burden and patients who are struggling to pay for frequent examinations.
What it means is those who have a negative result can be sent away without risk of missing disease, with high reassurance that there is very little likelihood of finding disease with them, and you can rescreen them after 5, some are even suggesting up to 10 years. The way that you are going to deal with patients who have positive results is what is going to make an impact in terms of preventing the later development of cancer. So using high precision equipment and also intermediary tests that are well proven in terms of efficacy.
An exchange program has also been established that's seen several Chinese doctors travel to Zimbabwe to conduct training and to share the latest methods in care and prevention of cervical cancer.
So in terms of what we can do here, I think time and also may not permit us to make a huge impact, but the impact comes in the number of people that we are going to train, and we are in the process of taking them from being students, junior doctors, interns, to doctors who are specializing. They should be comfortable to manage patients in a modern and efficient way.
The China-Zimbabwe Health Partnership is founded on the principle that healthy women guarantee healthy families and ultimately healthy nations. Cervical cancer is among the top 3 most prevalent cancers in the country and is the leading killer amongst women. With the assistance this country is getting from China, officials here are confident that they can turn those adverse statistics into more positive ones. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Egypt and China have been cooperating in many fields for decades, and the medical ties is a sector they are planning to dig deep into the near future. CGTN's Yasser Hakim brings us the story on the deepening ties between the two nations.
Medical cooperation between Egypt and China has been mainly restricted to importing medical equipment from China. But now the two sides are planning to build the ties on a permanent basis.
China is one of the most advanced nations in the health sector, and Egypt puts great emphasis on China's development in organ transplant operations. The cooperation is based on joint meetings and conferences to exchange expertise and information in the sector.
The latest cooperation is an MOU between the medical schools in Benha University and Wuhan University. It aims at student exchange, staff exchange, and learning from the advanced curricula in each university. Wuhan is quite advanced in several areas in the health sector.
The protocol is about training students on medical procedures in university hospitals, as well as trainings in organ transplant for doctors. China is quite advanced in this sector, particularly heart transplant. The protocol will not just benefit the students, doctors and teachers, but will also have an impact on the quality of services in the organ transplant field.
According to local media, Egyptian officials have been visiting Chinese companies to get updated with the latest medical equipment and modern technology in distant therapy or distance medical treatment. Egypt has also been a regular participant in medical conferences in China, such as the annual Chinese Arab Medical Forum in Beijing. And Chinese medical schools will be attending the Egyptian International Health Conference in Cairo next November. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
For the past 22 years, thousands of people flocked to Johannesburg for Joy of Jazz Festival to see some of Africa's and other international big jazz names boosting the City of Gold's cultural tourism. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
The sound is straight out of Sandton, Johannesburg's economic hub. It's jazz, it's groove, and it brings thousands to Joy of Jazz Festival.
For Johannesburg, spring equals jazz. Jazz equals spring. As Johannesburg being the center or the hub of economic activities within the continent, Joburg Jazz then is the event. With us being the tourism authority of the city, we are then here to say people must come and enjoy themselves in the city. This event, it brings a high profile of the destination, and it's one of those events that are celebrated globally. So this city does not only attract 4.5 million visitors a year, it also boasts itself with the facilities that can host these 4.5 million visitors that come to our destination on a yearly basis.
Now in its 22nd year, Standard Bank Joy of Jazz Festival attracts over 30,000 music lovers.
I adore jazz. I absolutely love jazz music, but I don't consider myself a connoisseur. In terms of what the event brings to Johannesburg, for me what I notice is it brings attention to the culture that's alive in the town. It brings attention to the talent that we have in terms of the musicians that we have in Johannesburg, but also it brings in local tourism. You have people traveling across the country just to come and enjoy the jazz sound.
I grew up in a house of jazz that is now in the house of music, and I fell in love with jazz before I discovered this. I've been going to Cape Town, been coming here, but this is my home, and this is, every time I'm here, I'm blown away. I love jazz.
The jazz is very important because it really relaxes you and it relaxes your mind. I just love the music. It is important because it will boost our economic hub and also put Johannesburg out in the map for the jazz.
The country's been going through so much problems, and jazz is soothing. It's where you can relax and meditate and think about life and think about the future. So yeah, we're here to celebrate.
Over the years, this event has grown the city's cultural tourism by bringing a range of jazz styles, international names, and upcoming young artists.
Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Ethiopia's Kenenisa Bekele comes 2 seconds short of the world record in his victory at the Berlin Marathon.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are